Koholint Island is the home of the windfish egg, which sits atop of the tall mountain, surrounded by the mysterious woods and the Torrenbow shores. Scattered about are caves, dungeons, and villages, but not everything here is as it seems. For this episode, I wanted the focus to be on the discussion between myself and Andres, my best friend. So throughout, I put text posts explaining what I did as far as painting goes. If you rather I cut in vocally to discuss the painting and give you a break from the discussion, I will do so for part 2, as our discussion ended up being about an hour long. I hope you enjoyed the discussion as well as the painting.
Dwight, you ignorant slut!
So we're here to talk about depression, specifically in males, not to diminish, depression in females. It's just, I feel more comfortable talking about depression in men because I am a man. And I feel like it's not really talked about that much either. So I feel like this is a good opportunity for us to do that.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to start off with a question for you. When did it all go wrong?
Yeah, I saw this question. You sent me questions, but I didn't want to be too prepared. So I was just like, okay, I get the idea. I don't think I have a specific moment. I think growing up playing sports, you're so exhausted physically that you don't have a lot of time to see what's going on, how the gears are turning, if anything needs any WD-40 or anything like that.
Man.
Yeah.
That's a man term.
Yeah. So, no, I don't think I have a specific moment. I think around the time I was leaving sports, it was just becoming more evident how much it was there, but I don't think that was like the moment it started. It was more just like, oh shit, it's on my mind more.
When I was reading for depression in men was that basically what typically it stems from is they don't know how to handle their emotions.
Yeah.
So it's just a lack of understanding of how to deal with it. So do you feel that you leaving sports stemmed from it just because you weren't sure how to handle it?
It could be. I think there is something to the not being sure how to handle it. I don't think I've ever been around anyone who's handled it properly my whole life, even though I feel like looking back, I'd be like, oh yeah, a lot of these people are fucked up. But I don't know. It's, because there is the sort of general toxic masculinity where it's just like, I'm a man, I can't show emotion or anything like that. But I don't think that's ever had too much of an effect on me. Like, I have no illusions about my masculinity, as, I couldn't grow a beard in 80 years if I tried. And I'm not very, physically prominent or anything like that. So I've never had, illusions about being a macho man. And, and I think some of that comes from, not just being a man, but Hispanic macho culture is also very sort of overpowering. So I just sort of rejected that my whole life. So it's more like I didn't know how to deal with it because I didn't have any examples to look to. But also I think this is the reason I'm glad we're having this conversation. I think I've just avoided it my whole life. I avoid the topic just not out of denial, but more when you give it a name, it becomes real type thing. You're always like, I think I'll just say it's something else.
I'm just bummed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that definitely goes into what I believe is happening now, where growing up, we were kind of in this weird middle place where depression was starting to become accepted, but not as much in men. I mean, I saw it on TV a lot where women were depressed. I think there's only one TV show where there was a man who was affected, and I remember they handled it decently, where the wife was like, well, you're not depressed because that means I'm failing as a wife. I was like, well, it's not about that. That's not what it's about. But I remember there was only a couple episodes, so even for me at a young age, it was like, okay, well, he's just depressed. And then I never thought about it again. But now we're coming into a more, I don't want to say advanced, but we're being more accepting about men having depression. And it's definitely a bit better. It's not so stigmatized as much. People definitely feel more comfortable talking about it, which is good. But you and I definitely grew up in that kind of in-between, I feel.
Yeah, totally. I think, a lot of that, men being able to talk about their emotions more, we've been listening to emo music since, what, forever, we grew up on Jimmy Eat World and I guess All American Rejects. And
my first actual music was that I chose because my dad kind of was like, Meatloaf, Led Zeppelin,
Yeah,
AC/DC, Queen.
dad rock.
Yeah.
Fucking textbook dad rock.
I guess like back then it was just rock.
Yeah.
But like the first bands I listened to myself were The Strokes, Interpol, and then Modest Mouse.
Yeah.
Which Modest Mouse deals with a lot of crap.
Yeah.
The guy has his own problems. I hope he's okay.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, so I feel like we've always kind of had an outlet, at least an aesthetic one. There were people singing about being sad. And I've always been drawn to that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why.
I've always seen it as where there's like, it's kind of like, how do I explain it? There's a specific word. It's, I guess, an oxymoron where you want to listen to something sad because you're sad. And it's like, well, that's just going to make you more sad. It's like, it's more so where you don't feel alone.
It doesn't, though. Yeah, it's community, you know? It's like, oh, someone understands me. Like, I don't know why that's so mysterious to people. Like, why do you listen to such depressing music? It's just like, because I'd rather not be depressed by myself, you know? Like, someone express, they've taken the time to put it into sound and words, and I appreciate it. Yeah. If I were to get academic, since I'm reading Aristotle right now, he says that we take a lot of pleasure in artificially representing things that are normally ugly, you know. So that's sort of, I think there's a version of that too, where they're sort of going into the darkest, ugliest pits of themselves and of human nature, quote unquote, and we're sort of finding pleasure in like, oh, I know what that is. I've been there, you know, or something like that. So.
Yeah, and then for me to answer the question, just so you're not the only one,
please.
I definitely do think I pinpointed to a degree, just because I've been dealing with it since I was pretty young. But I had that kind of mentality of, well, like in middle school, I was like, well, this is middle school. You're supposed to feel like angsty and frustrated all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to high school. I was like, well, this is high school. It's only supposed to get worse because puberty and girls and all the other real world problems.
Sure.
Then I graduated high school. It's like, cool. It still sucks. And that's kind of when I was like, maybe there's something wrong.
Still going, yeah.
And then like I talked to like a couple of doctors, and they all kind of said the same. It's like, oh yeah, you're depressed. It could be blood. It could be this. It could just be chemicals, or it could be something inherent in your emotions. And after talking to, I think, like a couple therapists and self-analyzing, because when you spend so much time alone like I do, you kind of just start not talking to yourself, but you kind of just start thinking about things more. Mm-hmm. And I realized that a lot of my depression and it turns out I have paranoia, which my psychiatrist had to tell me, which I didn't fucking know. Mm-hmm. I think I told you the story. Mm-hmm. And it stems from death. And I remember it's because one of my earliest memories was definitely not my first, but it was one of my earliest. My mom crying on the phone and pretty much telling me that her mom had died, and then seeing my mom so affected by it. And then growing up, it was a weird time in not just in my life but my family's life, because a lot of people were dying when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just an age thing. Definitely one of them was a sickness thing. One of my cousins at 18, he died. I always forget. I don't believe it was a seizure. I think it was a pre-existing medical thing that he had. He collapsed in the store and he just died at 18. And it kind of like threw me for a loop, because I was like, wow, this guy's really young. And at that time I was like, well, everybody dies when they're old. And then again, coming back to my mom, I was there when her dad died, because I was the first one there. I woke up to her screaming pretty much. I thought she was getting murdered. That's how bad of a scream it was. And I went into the room, and my grandpa had stopped breathing. And so we went to go get my brother, because at the time he was in EMT, so he was trying to do things, and he ended up passing away. So I definitely think like a lot of my depression comes from death based on actions I do, which is I always say goodbye to my parents and tell them I love them more than once before I leave the house. And if I don't do that, I get like immediately like scared of like, okay, this is the last time you're seeing them, go back and say it.
Yeah.
The same thing with Kim or my brother or you guys. I always have to tell you, goodbye, I love you, I'll see you later, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just because my last conversation with you guys never can be in my head something negative. It always has to be at least I love you or I'll see you later. Yeah. Because if not, I'll start getting scared.
Yeah.
And it's happened more than once where I'll just skip it, get in my car, start driving, and be like, you fucked up. Yeah. They're gonna die. So I'll either like text
it would
them or
be
go back.
Today. The only
the
fucking
one time
day.
you miss it.
I haven't missed it in 8 years.
So I definitely think like my depression stems from
we deflect with humor a lot.
Yeah, we do. So I definitely think my depression stems from not so much that memory, but just like the death and just seeing how badly it affected everyone around me.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of anxiety, and you have a lot of real world experiences that are, I think, contributing to that. not something that I can relate to in a lot of ways. I think it,
which is the point of the conversation.
Yeah, it's so different.
Yeah, because I'm trying to show
from.
that there's no specific mold for people when it comes to depression, men or women. Everyone experiences it differently, which is kind of like a side thing. But there was one time where, I was like, well, I'm depressed because nothing's going right. But then, I had a girlfriend, I had a job, I was getting paid decent, things were going well, but I was still depressed.
Yeah. And
I told one of her friends, I'm not gonna say who, but I told one of her friends, I was still depressed, and he said, I don't know if he was just frustrated, but he said, you have no reason to be depressed, everything's going right for you. And I'm like, yeah, which is why it sucks.
That reminds me, I was just listening to this album today. First line of, no, it's not the first line, but it's the chorus for Fill in the Blanks by Car Seat Headrest.
Oh.
Yeah. You have no right to be depressed. You haven't tried hard enough to like it. Haven't seen enough of the world yet, but it hurts. It hurts. Oh,
I definitely feel like that kind of, obviously, I don't think he's being serious in that song, at least from what I've heard.
He's a really snarky character, but I think it's there, like he's sort of toying with, the label of depression and the way people respond to it. It's sort of like he's playing the character of that person who's telling you, what are you depressed about? You haven't seen the world and how horrible it is, and you haven't tried hard enough to, appreciate what you have, or even more cynically, you haven't tried hard enough to just like appreciate the level of sadness that you have. Like, it's nothing compared to the suffering that other people go through, or something like that.
I feel like that mentality is not always a negative place. I feel like they're trying to make you feel better, but at the same time, it's diminishing your actual feelings.
Yeah, I think there has to be a kind of affirmation to start it off. Like, hey, what you're feeling is what you're feeling, and you don't have to justify that to anyone. That's just what it is right now, and then you can start talking about strategies to cope with it.
Which I think ties into the whole what we were talking about, the difference between depression and bummed.
Yeah, it's like that line from The Office. Depression, isn't that just a fancy way of saying you're bummed out? Dwight, you ignorant slut. I thought it would be kind of interesting to just look up depression. Let's see what the internet says about words, because they're the final authority on every word. Google. Okay, so it goes straight to clinical depression is a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities, causing significant impairment in daily life. Impairment's kind of general, but loss of interest in activities is a little more specific. And I hate that depressed mood is in the definition of depression.
Aren't you not supposed to use the word?
Yeah, because it's like it went to the medical. Oh, okay. Just despair, melancholy, sadness. I think, but it's persistent. Yeah.
From what I've learned from being on medication, is that you can't really tell when you're feeling the symptoms because you don't have any baseline to compare it to. Yeah. At least with me, because it's been happening since I was young. Where I've always just felt, I guess, like depressed, melancholy, all that other stuff. Yeah. Where I would just lose interest quickly and stuff. But with the medication, you kind of start feeling, I guess, what I would consider normal. But then, like recently, the pills haven't been working as well, and now it's a distinct difference between you being productive, even if it's a little couple things, to just laying in bed for like 8 hours a day.
That's the vicious cycle, right? Because then you hate yourself for laying in bed all day. Yeah, it's one of the differences, I think, like, because I don't have a lot of anxiety with my depression. It's just numbness and sort of lethargic. Lethargy. I was like, where does the emphasis go on this word? Lethargy, and then like unmotivated. And I think that
unmotivated is definitely the worst part.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, just work out and you'll feel better. It's like, but I need the motivation to get there. And that's something my brother doesn't really understand, where I'll tell him, like, I've been working out, and he's like, how's it going? I was like, yeah, it's good. I'm just worried because I feel like I'm going to hit that wall soon and just not want to do it, which I have, but I managed to power through. And he's like, well, how does that make sense? You just got to do it. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right.
You just got to feel better.
It's like, it's harder to explain to people, especially to him because he's my brother.
Yeah.
The difference between, like, because I know how I am, and it's not so much a way to, like, excuse it. It's just I know that I fall into grooves whenever I'm really depressed, where I just like, you know what, I'm not gonna do it. I'll just do it later.
Yeah.
And then that falls into another vicious cycle of just never doing it.
Yeah. And then being upset with yourself for not doing it. Because that always, I feel like that's the most reliable thing to help you feel better, is sort of accomplishing something, you know, like setting a task list for yourself and then completing it or doing some of it, you know, whatever. Those are always at least like momentary feelings of accomplishment that at least assuage the depression or the sort of mood that has been keeping you from doing it. So it probably is like a sense of practice, like being able to accomplish maybe just one thing today, and then maybe next week you can work on 2 a day or something like that. Yeah. It is like a workout all in its own to get out of bed.
Exactly, yeah. And that's something that like I can't really tell. I talked to my mom a little bit about it, but every time I tell her, she just looks so hurt. Because I know how her mind is, and and she typically blames herself whenever something goes wrong for me. Mm-hmm. So me telling her, like, you know, it's hard for me to even exist in general.
Yeah,
is something that she would take to heart and be like, well, I failed. And it's like, it's not that. It's just, you know, it's something that I have to do.
That's really interesting. That might be something that we probably have in common, where we're both sons of immigrants, and they come from very physically oppressive backgrounds, or at least countries, maybe not necessarily at least with my parents, not necessarily the wealth background, but my mom was rich and my dad was not super rich, but not like super low either. But the countries themselves were, they sort of kept you at the task at hand to the point where they had to get out. And so, yeah, in those situations where they have to come to a country and create a life for their kids, where they wouldn't have to deal with those things, these issues I think are really mysterious for them, and it makes sense that they would register it as some sort of failure on their part, that they didn't create the exact, you know, environmental circumstances so that you would be happy, when it doesn't have a lot to do with them, or probably has something to do with environmental circumstances, but not the ones that they've been working on this whole time. You know,
we left the country so you wouldn't get eaten by La Llorona.
Yeah.
Why are you sad?
Yeah, exactly. Do they have a chupacabra here? Let's see one.
And yeah, and surprisingly enough, I think my parents are kind of the same as yours, because my mom didn't exactly, she wasn't rich, but she grew up on a farm, and they weren't really, like, we were able to eat meat and other stuff. Whereas my dad grew up in the city, and he was very poor with his brothers. And his dad, not really there. His mom were there, but always working. So I definitely think they're similar in that aspect, but different countries, right?
My parents?
Yeah. Guatemala,
Salvador.
Yeah, mine are both from Mexico. So it's definitely kind of the same idea, but definitely different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to it, I choose to believe, this is like the only optimistic part of myself, but I choose to believe that parents typically just want the best for their kids.
Yeah, totally.
And when things don't go the way they want, specifically their kids being happy or being successful, they feel like they failed, and then it's up to them either to take it out on their kids because they're angry, or to just internalize it and just be upset,
and then they beat themselves up about it. Yeah,
either way it's not good.
Yeah, it's not. There's so much out of their hands, right? Like, especially in our case, like, they're coming to like a really, I think, radically different culture here, and the sorts of things that inform depression in the States are going to be a lot different than the ones that did in their countries. Like, I don't know how much they talk about toxic masculinity in Guatemala. It kind of just runs rampant, you know, and I don't know if they are super self-aware about how much it's stifling their emotions or anything. Obviously not with everyone, it's just my experience.
No, in Mexico it feels the same, where it's like you have to be a man.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people that I've worked in a lot of menial labor areas with we'd be first generation immigrants, right? No, first generation what's the word I'm looking for?
I don't know. I usually tick the box that says first generation student. Yes, first generation college student.
Okay, well, the people that I work with, they're older than me, so they either came from a different country or they were just born there. But the ones that came from a different country, they always kind of had that attitude of like, well, you have to be tough Like there was one at Home Depot where I would put my gloves on before grabbing lumber because I didn't want to mess up my hands.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, just grab it with your bare hands. It's like, you're tougher than wood. I get it. I'm not. Let me put my gloves on.
You give the wood splinters, all right? We get it. Your skin penetrates, and the wood is like, ow. I'm going to feel that for a week, and then the wood's going to grow over. I'm not going to be able to find the skin. It's going to be very annoying. And eventually, it's going to push itself out. But not before infecting the wood in some capacity.
Jeez. But like the point being is that like toxic masculinity is definitely around in America,
And we're really self-conscious about it.
Yeah.
You know,
it's kind of about like, well, you know, is this manly enough, or can I be doing this even though, you know, I'm gonna be looked down upon? And that's what it comes a lot when it comes to even something menial, or not menial, something small like clothing, like wearing this, or people are gonna make fun of me because I don't look.
Yeah, definitely a lot of social anxiety. That's like, I don't know what you do about that. I don't think that ever goes away. I can't think of any sort of utopian society that doesn't have its own, you know, like social anxiety for any middle schooler or kid going through puberty.
There's always going to be that need to fit in, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why a lot of depression happens in high school, or anxiety in high school as well. Because there's that need to fit in, and you're forced to go every day.
Yeah.
And to try to fit in. And if you don't fit in, then obviously you're going to be looked down upon. Maybe not as prevalent, but you're definitely going to feel like you're on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a like this force or this tension between a need to fit in and to be unique in a sense, you know, because we have a pretty strong celebrity culture in the U.S. too. Like the people that everyone likes and looks up to are very like successful, individualistic, or have some quirky thing about them. So I think there is like if you grew up sort of automatically standing out in some way, then the fitting in sort of forces a little bit more. But if you're just sort of in the middle, then you're trying to balance between the two. Like you don't want to be too weird, but you don't want to be like a forgettable blob in the background either, you know? So
that's definitely why a lot of celebrities can get away looking ridiculous.
Yeah.
There was one time with my supervisor where he was like, do you think I could pull off the hair from The Weeknd? This is back then when The Weeknd was fairly new and he had that crazy hairstyle. I was like, he barely pulls it off, and that's because he's famous. If it was anybody else, people would be making fun of him.
Yeah, that's true.
Going back to the depression and bum, did you ever go through that phase where it's like, I'm not depressed, I'm just sad?
Sure, yeah. It's like the lyric from the There song where it's like, I can't remember exactly, but he struggles with self-diagnosed conditions, right? Like that you're just constantly skeptical about it. And I think that for me, it's just I don't know exactly what's behind every label that we give things, or what's supposed to be behind it. You know, like whether it's a feeling or, you know, putting it into words, and somehow I'm gonna try to justify it some other way before I go into like something that I think would be considered clinical. So I think that's me always being skeptical about my own, you know, feelings, and so I probably defer more to like, I'm bummed out today, again, rather than like, this is a medical issue and I need to go get this checked out. Certainly avoid that in a lot of ways. So, but you know, eventually it's overwhelming, right? You know, suicidal thoughts, drinking the way drinking I do is probably an indication of some sort. But yeah,
that was
sometimes
also on the symptoms of depression of man is the substance abuse.
Yeah.
Which you don't think when you think of drinking, because substance you think of like drugs, hard drugs.
Yeah, sure.
And then alcohol is just like, it's just a drink.
Yeah, totally.
With the buddies, while I'm at home and they're outside. They're here in spirit.
Yeah. I said no when they invited me out, but I'm gonna get drunk here anyway. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of skepticism about putting the final like label on it, but yeah, there's enough actions to call a spade a spade.
That's definitely a question I want to ask to the people watching is, essentially, do you feel like you're not really depressed, even though it's there in your face? Because like that's something I definitely went through and still go through, where it's like, no, I'm not depressed, I'm just sad. And I've had doctors tell me like, no, you shouldn't be paranoid.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be feeling this kind of way. That's not normal.
Yeah.
And then kind of like explaining my thought process to my wife at the time, or to my friends. Not really my friends, because you all kind of go through the same shit as I do, but like just people that have a normal thought process, and then being like, that's not normal.
Yeah, it's
and then it's there in your face, and then you're like, wow, I really do have an issue. I feel validated. And then like 2 minutes later, you're like, nah,
yeah,
I'm just bummed.
right. Yeah, it is very strange talking to people that just seem so like perfectly happy and blissful all the time. It's just like, and I'm sure they're very complicated people with very mixed emotions about a lot of things, but they just either they're pulling it off really well all the time, or like you get into conversations like this and they're just blank stare on their face. They're like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, man. Shit's great. Those are always, it's hard to relate all of the time.
Pretty much the last question I had. So how long do you feel like you've been dealing with this?
I don't know, man. Like, when you're not putting definitive markers on when it starts and ends, it's hard to say exactly. I think like it's easy to point to sort of the dip of playing soccer continuously and sort of working out continuously, and spending more time in my head, and now I'm an English major now, and I spend a lot of time with my mind, and we have a lot of conversations, so I have to deal with it constantly. Whereas before, when you're playing sports, you're sort of forced to be in your body. You're forced to have that relationship with your body, and it's honestly, it's great. You're tired and you're exhausted, and it's a lot of physical pain, but it's like, yeah, you're always like in the moment, like all those people talk about like being in the now and meditation and stuff like that, just to be like in the moment, and there's something like peaceful and happiness. Like fucking run 8 miles. You won't be anywhere else but your own fucking body, dude. Like, you're exhausted. There is a true bliss to that. Ironically, like physical exertion. And so I miss it a lot, and I think I was in a healthier mental state when I was like that more often. I think I was always sort of prone to the.
But do you feel like it's a healthier mental state, or you're just ignoring it? Because when I lift weights, my mind is on not letting the weight fall and kill me, and focusing on the times, making sure I'm doing it enough times, and in those 30 to 45 minutes, my mind is on the weights, making sure I'm calculating the right amount, making sure I'm marking it, and then in between, I'm typically watching something, because I have to wait like 90 seconds between each set so that I can rest and then do it again. So my mind and those between are what I'm watching, and then back to the weights.
So it's kind of like constant distraction.
Yeah. So do you feel like it's helping that you're in the now, or is there more so you're just distracting yourself?
I don't know what's I think a lot of depression is revolves around a kind of inability to be present, like you're constantly scattered, like you were saying about the sort of different forms of paranoia that come up for you. It's your mind is in so many different places, and that can create obviously a lot of bad feelings. So it's hard to say if it was there hiding underneath those seemingly calm moments of being tired or exhausted or whatever. Maybe couldn't tell you. I had a lot of like difficult times, but I could always identify a cause. I feel like when we're talking about depression, these are the sort of not really clear what the cause would be type thing. So yeah, I think the form it takes nowadays is more like constantly sort of abstracting everything, words, labels, things as simple as like happiness and love and meaning, and just constantly being sort of jaded by the things everyone finds meaning in, and just over intellectualizing it, or just sort of seeing it as this surface level word that people use to make themselves feel comfortable. Cough, cough, religion, cough, cough, whatever. And so it leaves you with not a lot of things to look for internally. You're just left with a bunch of surface level words and images and things in the world that don't really make you feel anything at all. They're just all, especially in a capitalist system that needs to monetize everything. everything is a show, a performance of some sort, and that can feel really empty. And when the world seems that way, then you just like look at yourself and like, wow, I'm kind of performing all the time too. You know, like I'm always putting on some sort of face. What the fuck's going on in my head? I don't know. Probably nothing. And that's depression for me most of the time.
Oh, good. Yeah, we figured out what it is.
Yeah, there's I have like textual references as well. It's called that's not original. It's what's called the fraudulence paradox. That sad boy David Foster Wallace wrote about. The fraudulence paradox was that the more time and effort you put into trying to appear impressive or attractive to other people, the less impressive or attractive you felt inside. You were a fraud.
Damn.
Yeah. and it's not a like it's just a sort of emptiness. Mm-hmm. It's a sadness that comes from emptiness, but it's not like there's not a lot to justify the sadness, and so it just sort of stays numb and boring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I definitely get the fraud part. When I was in high school, I would always try to fit everyone's mold. Mm-hmm. Just because I had this fear of not really being accepted, just because growing up I didn't have friends. And it wasn't until middle school, and then the whole thing happened, I didn't have friends again. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of middle school into high school, I had some friends. And I was like desperate to hold on to them. Mm-hmm. So I would try my best to just be whatever they wanted me to be. Mm-hmm. Which has not always been negative. I mean, I probably wouldn't be playing bass guitar now if it wasn't for that. Because there was a time, this is a story I tell a lot, where my friend was like, hey, I play guitar. Our third friend plays drums. You know, we just need to find a bassist and we can start a band. And I had a bass. I didn't know how to play it. But I had one. I was like, oh, I have a bass, just because I wanted to be part of the conversation. Yeah. They're like, cool, you'll be our bassist. And I'm like, all right. Because I didn't want to say no.
Yeah.
And now I play bass.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes you to some interesting places. Yeah. That impulse. It's... Yeah, that seems like... but now you love bass.
Yeah.
You know, like, and you damn well should. You're fucking good at writing those bass lines, and you're good at learning them.
And I think even if it wasn't for the depression, I'm not sure that I would have got into it. Because there was nothing really pulling me there. But I mean, I don't know how, Marco of 2009 would be without depression. He'd be like, you know what, I'll play bass. Or I've been playing bass. Maybe I had that motivation. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
But pretty much the question going back to it is, well, it seems you're not entirely sure when, but have you tried to get help for it? And if not, what's really been holding you back?
Again, that sort of anxiety or resistance to give something a name and make it real, I think. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have told me to get help. I damn probably should. I probably will. I like the conversations and being able to at least navigate the labyrinth of the character of what my depression might look like. So, yeah, it is something I should do, but I don't know. Doesn't it cost money?
Yeah, there's always a reason not to do it.
Yeah.
With me, which is something we talked about briefly a while ago, I kind of had this fear of, I've been depressed so long, and I've pretty much from all the stuff that I've been feeling, I've written poems, I've written short stories, I've written bass lines, and I felt scared of who I am without depression. And I was like, well, maybe I'm completely different to who I am now. And that scared me because I didn't want to change. I wanted to be me. As we are nearing the end of our video, I will cut the discussion there. Be sure to come to my next video to hear the conclusion of our talk. Now to focus on this piece. The cons were my lack of expertise with 3D printing. The trees had a lot of loose filament that looked like string, which I did try to cut, but unfortunately I couldn't get them all. There's also some rough edges on the cloud piece. The pros are definitely the mountain range. When I see a piece with that many raised grooves, I get excited to dry brush them, as it tends to give the pieces extra detail, which I always like. Anyways, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed this new kind of format. Let me know what you think.
Shine.